All right, what's going on, my friends? It's now 4 o'clock. Chad here. The NFL season will kick off on Thursday night. It's going to be a 5:20 kick on NBC and Peacock. The Dallas Cowboys will be in Philadelphia to meet the defending champion Eagles. Right now, Philly is favored by 8.5. The New York Giants have unofficially listed Jackson Dart as Russell Wilson's backup. New York will be in D.C. to meet the Commanders on Sunday, a game that can be heard here on 620 Rip City Radio. We have a new AP poll out. Ohio State, with their win over Texas, a new number one. Oregon is sixth. They got one first-place vote. The Ducks will take on Oklahoma State Saturday. Oregon has been set as a 28.5-point favorite. The Mariners' road trip continues today in Tampa. That first pitch coming up at 4:35. Brian Wu is on the bump for Seattle. The M's right now 3 games back in the West. Alex Brink, former Coug and our college football and NFL insider, joining the show today at 5:20. All right, Alex Brink, former Coug and quarterback whisperer, are going to join us coming up at 5:20. I love talking ball with Brink. And Brendan Slaughter going to stop by here in 20 minutes to talk Beavs and give insight on what went down against Cal. That was a rough watch. Like, I don't need those type of games in my life. It was a very difficult watch, and I hope and I think we'll see better from the Beavers as they move forward, and the schedule will be favorable at points, which is nice. And I do like the reaction and some of the comments from Malik Murphy. I think he's the right quarterback for the school, and I like his leadership and his talent. So I expect bigger and better things from him moving forward. Brendan Slaughter going to stop by in 20 minutes. Mike Gundy, former quarterback at Oklahoma State and now head coach, where he's been in place for a very long period of time and has had a lot of success with his alma mater, was at his luncheon and gave his initial assessment of Oregon. And he was asked, after he takes a look at the Ducks on the film, some of his thoughts. Here's what he had to say.
What's what?
Your initial thoughts on the Oregon team?
Well, same thing as you. They're a good football team. Oregon is playing really well. I think they're well coached. They're spending a lot of money, and they've put a lot into that organization. And you can see they're a good football team.
You have a good tight end, but watching that guy, and I've watched him last season, and then what he did the other day.
They got 2 of them. They got 2 of them. Yeah, they're good players. Yeah. This will be a good challenge for our team, and they're going to be essentially going up against players that what people would think are comparable to the best organizations in the country at this time.
All right, there's Coach Gundy. Some of his thoughts. Oregon's spending a lot of money. Yeah, there are a lot of schools in the country right now who are spending a lot of money. Here's Dan Lanning's response when asked about Mike Gundy's comments about the cash.
There is listening to him talk. Like I said, I got a ton of respect for Coach Gundy. Ultimately, how blessed are we to be in a place that's invested in winning? If you want to be a top 10 team in college football, you better be invested in winning. And we spend to win. Some people save to have an excuse for why they don't, right? And ultimately, he's a great coach. They've done an unbelievable job, but I want to be a team that's competing at the highest level. And we're really fortunate to be in that situation. So I can't speak on their situation. I have no idea, what they got in their pockets over there. I'm sure UT Martin maybe didn't have as much as them last week, and they played. So we'll let it play out.
There you go. And now we've got something brewing for the game on Saturday. Now, Coach Gundy is somebody that I think has a lot of respect for different coaches around the country. I think he respects the Oregon program. And I think Mike Gundy's been the benefactor of a big-time donor in T. Boone Pickens, who has contributed a lot of money to Oklahoma State over the years and has helped build them into something much more than what they were before. They're always going to be second place in the state of Oklahoma to the University of Oklahoma. The Sooners are number 1. And the Sooners have a lot more money and resources than Oklahoma State does. But T. Boone Pickens poured in a ton of money into the school. for the stadium, for the facilities, different buildings on campus. He's done so much, and he's helped Mike Gundy to be able to build that program into what it is today. So I just don't understand why Gundy would even mention the money being spent with the Ducks. It's unnecessary because when you make those comments, you're instantly going to become billboard material, and you don't need to find different ways to motivate the Ducks, a team who has more talent, are better at the majority of positions on the field, and you're going into their house as a 28-point underdog. Just don't say anything at all. Yeah, they're spending money, a lot of it. And they're doing it wisely because they're investing in their football program. So there you have it. I mean, is Gundy bitter because Oregon has more resources? Possibly. But I doubt it. You know, he's more concerned about what he's got going on in his situation. But that is a reality of college football now. You have schools that have massive resources and will spend wildly on football because they want to be successful. And then you have programs who don't have the resources to spend the way you need to spend to be successful when it comes to big-time top 25 college football. That's just the reality. And we'll see how things continue to play out over time. But I really don't see it being much different than the way it was in the past. You're going to have schools that will always invest in football, and those same usual suspects are normally going to be at the top. What makes Oregon a bit unique is that they're new to the party, relatively new to the party. These other schools, Michigan, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Texas, you know, these schools have spent big and invested a lot in their program for years. You know, Oregon didn't really come onto the scene as a football player until Phil Knight started to get involved, and that's when everything changed. He came on board. He started contributing money to the school, and they really started to take the program in a different direction. And they've been so cutting edge in how they do everything. Their facilities are top-notch. Their NIL department, if you've talked to anyone that's dealt with the NIL department, talk about how innovative and phenomenal it is. Their facilities are top-notch. Their uniforms and the way that they've been able to get national publicity for the way they operate has been impressive. And now Dan Lanning is able to go anywhere in the country and recruit to his school and get players from all over the country to go to Eugene. You know, I think what the Ducks have done over the last, 40 years is impressive. Started with Rich Brooks, and then Mike Bellotti took it to a different level. Chip Kelly took it to a different level. And now Dan Lanning, after the job that Mario Cristobal did recruiting-wise, has taken it to a different level. And you say what you want about Mario Cristobal, taken off to Miami, but Cristobal did a great job when he was here. And he recruited like a mother. And look at what he's doing at Miami now, coming off that win over Notre Dame. I just think the Ducks have done a great job. It's very impressive to see where the program's at today. And with Dan Lanning in charge, they're going to be a national power, knocking on the door year in and year out. And they have invested well. Let's take a look here at T-Boone Pickens' total amount contributed to Oklahoma State. According to Rabbi Google, T-Boone Pickens contributed a total of approximately $650 to $652 million to Oklahoma State University for both academic and athletic initiatives, with his giving focused on projects such as stadium renovations, faculty chairs, and student scholarships. This extensive philanthropy helped transform the university's athletic program and establish facilities that bear his name, including T-Boone Pickens Stadium. It's pretty good. It's not bad to have a donor that kicks in $652 million. Pickens made significant contributions to the athletic department, including a record-breaking $165 million donation in 2005 for the football stadium. He also supported academic endeavors, including funding faculty chairs and professorships. His donations were used to develop Boone Pickens School of Geology, the Human Performance Innovation Complex, and the Karsten Creek Golf Course. Pickens' giving places him among the top philanthropists to higher education in the United States. His significant support helped strengthen OSU's position as a leader in research and athletics. There you go. So it's not like Oklahoma State is poor. They've had significant help. Now, that's not as much as Phil Knight and what he's contributed to the school, but I just don't understand why Mike Gundy would feel needed to speak. I mean, at some point, you just got to, put your head down and get ready for the game and go out there and get it done. But I love Dan Lanning. Anyone that says anything that's slightly off about him or his program, he has no problems firing back. Dan Lanning is a fiery, competitive dude. I like him. I like the way he approaches the game. I think he's a great motivator. He's good at getting his guys ready to go, and he embraces where he's at and what they're trying to accomplish. And he does not apologize for the fact that Oregon is willing to invest and go out there and get the job done. I just thought they were impressive week one. Boy, 253 yards passing, 253 yards rushing. They were on top of things. They were a well-oiled machine. Like, that was the way you want the opener to look. Not like last year, but this year. Offensive line was good. Defense got pressure. But you're seeing the benefits of the efforts that he's made to build the roster and construct it kind of in his image and the way he wants to play. Knowing that if you want to compete against Ohio State or Georgia or the best teams in the country, you've got to be more stout at the line of scrimmage. And that gives him the opportunity to be better prepared to go in and compete with a team like Penn State. Because Penn State is strong at the line of scrimmage, but the Ducks, they've got those type of players. And Dante Moore has got experience. And Oregon, of course, has team speed. I can't wait for that game. I think Oregon's got a great chance. I expect Oregon to go in and win that game. I really do. Penn State's got to prove a lot to me before I can jump on board this hype train with the Nittany Lions. Can they win a big game that matters? Can they win a big game in conference that matters? And can they finally be that team when everyone expects them to be? I'll believe it when I see it. All right, telephone number is 503-248-0620. 503-248-0620. That's your telephone number. You can jump on board. Find me on social at Chad and Rip City. I got a frantic text message from Tony and Boring. He sent me a birthday present that, according to him, arrived last week. I have not seen it. I don't know if it was delivered to the wrong place. He did not get a picture of the delivery. But I'm sorry, Tony, I've not seen it. I don't know where it's at. I cannot help you with that. All right. What went wrong with the Beavs in game number 1 against Cal? Brendan Slaughter's going to break it down for us. We'll get his take on Malik Murphy, on some of the issues they faced and what they need to do moving forward to get it right. And then Alex Brink will stop by to talk ball coming up at 5:20. Your telephone number is 503-248-0620. I appreciate your time on this Tuesday, coming off a long weekend. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, my man Brendan Slaughter from Beaver's Edge, kind enough to join me in studio to talk about what we saw on Saturday night with Cal and Oregon State. And you just brought up a dreadful reality to the situation. They play Fresno State coming up this weekend, and it's going to be at Reser, so it's a good opportunity for the Beavers to bounce back. But if they don't win this game, with games looming against Oregon and Texas Tech, they're going to be 0-4 out of the gate, and that's not a good place to be.
No, I mean, you're talking about the overall expectations, Chad, for year two of Trent Bray. And, we knew this Cal game was a 50-50 game. I think, it goes back to the, you're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are. But it was a 50-50 game. Cal showed they were better coached, better executed, everything across the board. And now, to your point, like Fresno State, not a pushover by any means. And Fresno State's going to, come into Corvallis somewhat inspired after getting their first win in the season last week. And to your point, I don't see things changing for Tech and Oregon. So you have to win this. You start 0-4. That's like making changes on coordinators kind of at level, I think, Chad.
Okay, one small matter that gave me anxiety during the course of the game. Did you find out from Coach Bray afterwards why he decided to go for 2 when he was down 15?
So, again, we've learned now that Coach Bray sometimes just gives us pretty vanilla answers. And very easily someone asked him, what was the logic? And he said, the analytics said to do it. And no kind of follow-up. He's like, that was the analytical piece, I believe was the exact quote. So
let me get this straight. So the analytics said to do it. So you're down by 15. If you kick an extra point, you're down 2 scores by 14. If you go for 2 and you don't get it, it would seem to me you put yourself in a hole at that point. I don't understand the analytics there.
No, and we've seen it, I don't either, and we've seen it a little bit, on multiple levels, Chad, even the NFL where guys are going for 2 or this or that, and you're like, the analytics. I don't understand if you would be down, like you said, 14, and you don't get it, then you're like chasing points. And when you start chasing points, especially in a game like that,
but there was no injury to the kicker or the snapper. There was no situation that would lend them to.
No, that was just the choice, and I would assume whatever their little chart is that tells them, hey, if you need to go for 2, trailing by this many, all those things. I guess that's just what that said.
Okay. Let's stay focused. What did you think, position group-wise, what was the biggest issue for you coming out of the game?
Probably run blocking, Chad. I mean, you want to talk about, Cal, you go back to last year's performance against Cal. Beavers got absolutely railed down in Berkeley, and Cal maybe perhaps figured out the X factor for how to slow down this Oregon State offense. But no matter how great we think Malik Murphy could be, can be, will be, all those things, if you don't have that signature Oregon State running game to go along with it, and I think Anthony Hankerson had something like 14 carries for 40-some-odd yards, that's just not going to get it done. I mean, Saladin Law had just a couple carries. There was no sense of a ground game. I thought, the offensive line still, it was a work in progress, but I thought they could still open up some holes. By my count, Chad, there's maybe one run that broke, but they couldn't get anything going on the ground game. Then that's been the key to stopping Oregon State for a handful of years now. You stop that ground game, make them one-dimensional, and the results are usually not in Oregon State's favor.
I think you bring up a good point because I felt bad for Malik Murphy from the standpoint that he was under duress throughout the course of the game. And, of course, Coach Wilcox is one of the best defensive minds in college football. But you could really see it. Once they couldn't establish the run, they put Murphy in a situation where it was obvious passing downs, and Cal was feasting on that throughout the course of the night.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Justin Wilcox, what he's able to do, and the fact that, I was looking at the game notes, and I'm like, wow, he's already in his 9th season at Cal. He's never had the crazy successful year, but, man, they've always been good defensively. They can recruit. They just put several guys in the NFL from the defensive backfield, and you add in the fact that, there's former Oregon State defensive coordinator Keith Hayward is their defensive backs coach. I'm sure he didn't offer them nothing as far as, insight in the offseason. And for the most part, Oregon State's offensive line was new and new look, sure, but I expected them to at least break a run or two. I mean, even last year in some of the bad games, Chad, at the end of the year, they played Boise State. That was not a particularly close game. They still managed to pop a couple big runs. So I think you got to work on the run blocking on offense for sure.
All right. The one point that Phil Steele made about the Beavs, and he thought they would be dramatically improved this year. He's always concerned about teams that go heavy in the transfer portal from the standpoint that you have a very short period of time from the moment they arrive on campus to getting them into the program and teaching them the way you want things done on both sides of the football. And so, therefore, you're going to lack chemistry and that cohesion that you need to have success, especially early in the season. I don't know if Coach Bray has specifically talked about that with you, but could it be a possibility that this is going to take maybe a little bit longer to get these guys on the same page to where we get that continuity? And that could play into the offensive line as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think you're talking about new pieces at position. You know, for instance, Rajon Davis, new starter inside linebacker, pretty much for the first time in his career. I thought he played well, but you still got some pieces on the defensive line. We're missing a few pieces, that aren't quite fully to where they want to be. And I mean, you talk about the schedule too, Chad. Like, I think objectively, looking back, Cal was probably more than a 50-50 game. It probably was, a game that Oregon State would have struggled in. And then you look like the schedule is kind of, laid out to struggle the first few weeks of the season. Like, if you look at Cal objectively, okay, maybe 50-50 game. I don't think anyone outside of, the Valley Football Center, Coach Bray and company are thinking Oregon State's going to go down to Texas Tech or Oregon and pull that off. So all the rest of us are sitting here going, well, it could be a rough couple weeks, but at the same token, if you can build that cohesion, you and I have talked about, there's still plenty of wins on the back half of the schedule if they can find the right, recipe over these next couple weeks, so to speak.
Brendan Slaughter, Beavers Edge, is here in studios. We're taking a look at Oregon State's first game against Cal. I did like Malik Murphy's comments after the game, talking about he needs to be more coachable. The players need to be more accountable, and he felt like they left a lot of stuff on the field. Missed opportunities for points, but I like his leadership and the way he took responsibility for his ineffectiveness and kind of setting that tone for the rest of the guys. I thought that was pretty solid. What was your take on Murphy after the game?
Yeah, I think everything you want to see in a starting quarterback. I think, there was obviously some frustrations. I think, like you said, maybe once Cal kind of realized, hey, Oregon State's not going to run the ball, we can kind of pin our ears and come back after this guy. That's what we kind of thought would happen on the other side with Cal having a true freshman quarterback. But his it just looked like a legit, almost dare I say NFL quarterback in the sense of being able to be, after a tough loss, you threw a pick six or near pick six, I should say, that almost effectively ended the game, and you stand up to the music, right? And I thought that, there were probably issues beyond Malik, and I don't think the loss is on Malik when it comes down to it. I think Oregon State's coaches did not have this team prepared. But at the same token, I think the way he took ownership, the way that, like you said, he needs to be coachable. This is a guy who, you go back, Chad, he's been in some big-time locker rooms. Not necessarily so much at Duke, but you go back a couple years ago, that locker room had Quinn Ewers, he, and I believe Arch Manning behind him. Like, that's probably three guys that have pretty big-time leadership qualities.
How's he doing physically? He got banged up quite a bit during the game. We saw him stretching on the sideline. Is he okay?
Yeah, he told us after the game it was just something minor. You kind of look at that replay. It was actually kind of awkward. Like, he pulls up to run. I think he kind of runs into the ref and his own player at one time. Maybe just, tweak the ankle a little bit, but he told us post-game he's fine.
Well, on the positive side, they have a great wide receiver. Trent Walker's awesome. He just continues to ball out. He was great last year, and he was dynamite in game number one, and he's one of those unique guys who is physical, but he's a very good route runner, good hands, and you can see the connection that Murphy and he have already been able to create.
Right. I mean, like I say, the pride of local, and I love having, a kid that's obviously a native Oregonian who's on the roster, someone who you go back and look, Chad, he had to work for years just to get in, like sat behind Silas Bolden, Anthony Gould, all those guys, and just kind of patiently waited until respectfully, there wasn't a lot in the Beavers receiving core that had established itself. And then he made the most of his opportunity. And you talk about, like, in fantasy terms, Chad, he's just a PPR machine.
Yeah.
Like, racking up the catches. There were even a couple times Murphy missed him when he was even more open. I think he was 9. I don't remember the exact yardage. It was like 9 catches of 10 targets for like $165, $145, something like that. And, outside of that, Oregon State's receivers and pass catchers really weren't there. Maybe it kind of shows the chemistry that needs to still develop between Malik and others, but it's nice to know that Trent Walker's still the same guy we expected him to be coming into the year.
All right, let's stick with the positive for a moment. Outside of Walker and his production, what else did you see that was encouraging?
I'll go to the defense, and again, 14-0, the way they got beat over the top early, not great, right? But if you look at it, too, like, if you can't score more than 14 points in a game, Chad, which it took Oregon State a long time to get over that mark in that game, you maybe don't deserve to win anyway. And I think early on, Cal had a plan. It was wise. Hey, Oregon State's got a junior corner over there, but he was a former wide receiver. We're going to pick on him and Jaleel Tucker. And then on the other side, a true freshman in Trey Glasper. I mean, if you're a quarterback, you're going to pick on those guys and go over the top. And, they did a couple times. And, I believe even one of the touchdowns was another one of Oregon State's more veteran defensive backs. But, later in the game, you saw a couple key pass breakups. There were a couple times Cal could have really put their foot on Oregon State's throat and kind of put the game officially away. Oregon State's defensive backs, Trey Glasper had a nice breakup. Jaleel Tucker had a nice breakup. So going back to your point, there are some new pieces. Maybe it takes them a little time to mesh, but you also saw enough on defense that you're like, okay, I could be somewhat optimistic. Offensively, I think you really had to dig with a fine-tooth comb to find something you really liked in that game.
All right, coming out of the game against Cal, health-wise, how are they getting ready for Fresno State?
Yeah, for the most part, I said Malik Murphy was good. Jacob Strand, left tackle, got banged up in that game. He exited. Trent Bray didn't offer any update on Monday, so he'd be one to keep an eye out as far as the offensive line goes. But they ended up rotating in about 6 or 7 guys on the offensive line as far as total snaps. So I think that unit's still kind of being, worked out. So we'll see ultimately how guys kind of ultimately shift around.
How was the atmosphere at Reese, the crowd and the atmosphere for week 1?
Not as good as I thought it would be, Chad. And this is coming from, an Oregon State graduate and everything else. And coming into the year, and obviously when I was on the mic for you last week, and I'll have to ask you how Disneyland was a little bit later, but, coming into the game, it wasn't your Idaho State. It wasn't your Portland State, where it's like, okay, it's just going to be a Joe Schmo, opponent, FCS, will roll. It was Cal. It was Power 4, and I went back and looked. It was the first time Oregon State had opened up against a, quote, Power 4 team at home in week 1 since Oklahoma State in 2019. And they hadn't, and this streak continues, they still haven't beat a Power 4 team at home to open the year since 2012. So it was rare, and I was like, okay, ESPN 7:30, maybe the crowd will get out for this. There's some buzz around Cal. There's some buzz around Oregon State, Malik Murphy. And I thought it was fine, but at the same token, Chad, there were just some things that, weren't ideal. Like it didn't fill out as much as I thought. I think Cal took the energy right out of the stadium immediately, and it never really got loud after that. Maybe a time or two here, but we got windows in the press box that are open. We can hear it, and it kind of felt quiet, like Cal was kind of operating. And then, you add in, a couple other things like players who weren't in the lineup being announced on the scoreboard. The scoreboard straight up going blank and showing 0-0, I think sometime in the third quarter. It just, the atmosphere wasn't quite what you would expect for week 1. So, that was maybe a little bit of a miss.
Was the 2012 win, was that against Wisconsin?
Was. Good memory.
Okay.
10-7. There it is.
All right. Yeah, that was a low-scoring game. Brendan Slaughter, Beavers Edge in studio talking Oregon State. All right, aside from the Beavers, there are a lot of great storylines coming out of week 1 of college football. Bill Belichick getting undressed last night on national TV. Alabama getting smoked on the road against Florida State. You had Arch Manning, who struggled mightily in his first real start against Ohio State. Like, outside of local, what was the biggest story that you thought that surprised you, that caught your eye?
I mean, not so much surprised, but I was really into that Ohio State Texas game to open kind of the college football because, Chad, when you don't even having to go a 7:30 game, and I didn't have to leave until afternoon. So I'm waking up, I'm like, I get to watch football all day. So that was kind of fun. As far as a surprise, like I know they ended up making it look a little better. Arch played a little better towards the end, but just kind of the way Ohio State just handled that game.
Yeah. They were in control from start to finish.
Yeah. And not to say that like they were world beaters and Julian Sayin put up just great, but it was Ohio State's game from start to finish, and maybe Ohio State should have been preseason 1 instead of Texas. So that was one, kind of across the board. I think there were a few other games that caught my eye. I was just talking to my buddy on the way in about that Belichick undressing. Like I was telling my buddy and my brother, I'm like, for as bad of a weekend that Oregon State fans probably had with expectations, North Carolina football fans got to feel worse, right? Like you had Belichick, and that was still your result. So, like I said, Chad, it's never as bad as you think. It's never as good as you think. I truly believe that.
Yeah, that Arch Manning. What impressed me about Sayin, and I think, his numbers were fairly meager, but he did exactly what the coaches wanted him to do. I think Ryan Day, once he got a look at his defense and saw how Manning was struggling, I think they just played it conservative. We're going to run the football. We're not going to make a big mistake, and our defense will win the game for us. And I thought Sam did a good job of just managing what the coaches wanted him to do. That was impressive. After seeing Sam play, and again, it's only 1 week, I think Ohio State is right in the conversation as having a chance to repeat.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that game, like I said, that game was exciting from start. I didn't expect it to be, low. I thought maybe be high scoring, this, that, and Ohio State and Ryan Day, man, they finally figured it out. They got over the hump. They seem to have dudes. I mean, they talked about. I think the thing with Ohio State that may impress me the most, Chad. This was Texas. We know Texas has got to have some of the best receivers in the country.
Yeah.
Ohio State's got like 4 6'2", 6'3" corners who are physical, can run, 4-4. Like they might have the best secondary that I like. It is impressive. Again, I watched that game closely, and then when I was at Reeser, they kept showing the talk about another undressing when Utah smacked UCLA. They had that
total
game
domination.
I'm like, oh, I mean, UCLA fans, if there are any, had to be feeling pretty bad too. So there were some interesting games this weekend for sure.
Yeah, 2 outlier seasons last year. Utah with Kyle Whittingham and Mike Norvell, Florida State. FSU only won 2 games. But if you look at Norvell's track record, the type of talent he's been able to recruit and the type of teams that he's had, he is a great coach. And, of course, Kyle Whittingham's been doing it for years. I thought both those teams look good. But, Utah, we'll see as time goes on. But they were back to doing what they do best. We're going to run the football. We're going to dominate the line of scrimmage, and we're going to squeeze the life out of you. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, I mean, Utah, big whip, man. I've always had a lot of respect for Kyle
I love
Whittingham.
the guy.
Yeah, he is just as, I think only one of the top. I think he's second for longest tenure with the school at this point.
Was it him and Gundy are the 2 longest?
I think so now because, I think it is those 2 now, which is just absolutely crazy. So he's been there forever, and you got to love the loyalty, the dedication. He's gotten offers to go elsewhere. But before we, I think that was impressive. And just to add on to your point, Chad, I mean, you and I both know just from watching what he was able to do locally here at Fresno State and Washington, Kalen DeBoer is one absolutely amazing coach. Is there a chance that he's going to get run out of Alabama before things even get started? Like, it's fascinating to me how quickly, it wasn't a bad year last year, but it wasn't Alabama standards, and following Nick Saban is tough. But we know Kalen DeBoer is as good as any.
Yeah, I was talking about this earlier. I think it could be a situation where his personality does not match, and it's not a good fit for Alabama being down south, especially going from a guy like Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer, because DeBoer he's not a dictator. He's not a yeller or a screamer, and he's just not like Saban. So it may not be a good personality fit, because there's no doubt DeBoer is one of the best coaches in the country. So I think that could be the situation there. And, the reality is, too, with Alabama is that here's the other issue with DeBoer. I think the buyout is like $63 million, right?
So much money.
So here's the situation, and you know this as well as anyone. The schools now that they're having to go to their donors for money for the players, they don't have the resources to be able to pay out a coach like DeBoer. Here's $63 million to go away, and then you got to come up with a new head coach. And if Alabama's going to hire a coach, they're going to go after one of the best. So you're going to have to pay top dollar for a new coach and his staff. Before you know it, you're in over $100 million just to clean up that mess.
Right.
I just don't think that they're going to have the resources to be able to do that, meaning DeBoer could probably go 3-9 and still be able to keep his job.
Right. I mean, I definitely agree, and that buyout, I didn't know it was quite that high, is insane. And I think the talk is obviously premature, but just real quick on that point, Chad, I mean, different coaches, but I think in kind of the same way, and someone Oregon State fans were familiar with, Brian Harsin obviously took Boise State to big heights, got the job at Auburn, and, things kind of flamed out for him in Auburn. I still think he's a heck of a coach, and now he's Cal's offensive coordinator. And, I think he's working wonders already with Justin Wilcox and that group. So, like, to your point, I think fit matters. I would agree that maybe the fit isn't great, but I still think he's one heck of a coach. So we'll see how all that shakes out.
All right, we missed one of the guys on the list. Kirk Ferentz is number 1 at Iowa. He took the job in '99.
Eesh.
Followed by Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham.
Okay, so Kirk Ferentz took that job, Chad, just for the sake of fun argument.
How old were you?
I was 3. when Kirk Ferentz took that job. Now I'm here talking to you on this
Hey,
mic.
wait a second. You got short hair.
Oh, yeah. I was waiting for you to notice. Yeah.
When did you decide to clip the ponytail?
The day Friday. So I did the week of hosting last week, and at the end I was like, new football season starting. I'd had this hair for a year and a half. Shacker was surprised when I saw him at the game on Saturday, but it was just time. We'll see. We'll see if it grows.
Isn't
back.
it easier to manage without having the long hair?
Oh, I mean, you go from 15, 20-minute showers to 5-minute showers. So that part's pretty.
work.
So again, like I said, it was fun. I had a fun adventure with it, but it was time for a change.
All right. Well, I appreciate your work last week filling in, and I appreciate you stopping by to talk some Beavs.
Absolutely, my man. Anytime.
All right. Alex Brink going to join us coming up at 5:20. Rip City Drive. You want to jump on board? 503-248-0620. You can find me on social at Chad and Rip City on X. Big thanks to Brendan Slaughter. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. I had a chance to watch one of the Oregon connections on Saturday. Sam Levitt, the starting quarterback at Arizona State, 2 touchdowns, running, 2 passing, and I think he became the first quarterback to do that in like 30 years down at Arizona State. They got the win over Northern Arizona, but I'm telling you, you want to check out Sam Levitt and his wide receiver, Jordan Tyson. Tyson is probably the top wide receiver in the country, and that quarterback-wide receiver combination, probably the best in the country. But those guys are super legit. Looking forward to watching them play against better competition coming up on Saturday. They will travel to Mississippi State to take on the Bulldogs with a little Big 12 SEC game, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And really enjoyed the college football. There's so many great things to watch. I was really impressed with Mike Norvell and the work he was able to do with Florida State against Alabama. The way they dominated the line of scrimmage, the way he was able to retool the team throughout the course of the offseason, coming off a 2-win season. And hiring Gus Malzahn is probably a smart idea. Gus Malzahn is one of the smartest coaches in the country, and just his unique way of moving the football, the way he can run it, the way he schemes it, the way he uses misdirection. I just like watching Gus Malzahn's offenses, and I thought he did a masterful job of calling the game Saturday against Alabama. That was impressive, very impressive. With Arch Manning, I was just surprised at how poor he looked at delivering the football. And I'm curious, and we'll talk to Alex Brink about this, but if you're a scout and you're watching him play for the first time in a meaningful game, a big-time matchup against elite competition, like what jumps out at you? Probably wasn't the interception. Quarterbacks are going to do that. I was more concerned about the mechanics, the footwork, the delivery of the football, how many balls were skipped to his receivers, and he just never really found a way to get comfortable. But I think Arch is going to be fine. And I think what's hard is that we want immediate results from everybody, especially our athletes. And for some of these young quarterbacks, it just takes time. Yeah, heck, even when they get to the NFL, right? It takes time. You got to remain somewhat patient. And I think for Arch Manning, it's just going to take him some time. He's going to be okay. That was a tough way to open up your career. Not too many quarterbacks are going to play their first meaningful game at a place like Texas on the road at Ohio State against the defending national champs. And that's about as tough as it gets. And my guess is for someone, when you have someone like Arch who starts to struggle, I don't think Steve Sarkisian had confidence in different things he called or things he planned on calling in that game because, one, he saw the coverage and how good the defense was and the way Matt Patricia was scheming it up, but also the struggles that Arch was having. I think coaches sometimes will dial it back if they know they have a guy who's struggling. And we just should have seen that coming a little bit. That's all. I didn't see him struggling like that. I thought he was going to be okay. I bought into the hype to a degree as well. But just remember, before you start bashing on Arch or the Manning family, the one point I would make about the hype surrounding Archie Manning, it was not generated by Archie Manning. He's not the one that created it. It wasn't him. It wasn't Peyton. It wasn't Eli. It wasn't his dad Cooper. It wasn't his grandfather Archie. The Manning family had nothing to do with the hype train. That was generated by football fans and the media. And Arch seems like a nice young man, not somebody going out looking for attention, right? That's just not the way it's going to happen. So there you have it. What a great weekend. And unfortunately, the slate of games this weekend, not the same, but I look forward to watching it. Michigan and Oklahoma is going to be nice. Arizona State and Mississippi State has some intrigue, and I think Iowa State is a good game as well. But outside of that, this is just kind of the week where teams continue to tune up as they prepare for the meat of their conference schedule, like Oregon, with Penn State coming up in a few weeks. One thing I did want you to hear, and maybe this is some insight as to why the Raiders had no interest in Shedeur Sanders, but take a listen to Tom Brady as he's calling a game, what he looks for and what he's watching when big plays are made.
That's what I look for all the time. When a quarterback throws a touchdown pass, I actually watch to see who he goes and celebrates with. Because what did I do? I looked for my offensive lineman every time. I went down and celebrated in the end zone with my teammates every time. I wanted everyone to feel like they were part of the success. I told the linemen, we're all running to the end zone and we're celebrating as a team. Because I think that's way more intimidating than a quarterback doing his 6-shooter guns and pointing up in the crowd and doing all that other that's very self-promotional, but it's not about winning. And I think winning in football is about a team, always a team attitude first.
Well, you got to love that. That's Tom Brady. Not that I have a problem with a quarterback doing some self-promoting or celebration, but that's the best to ever do it, talking about making sure that we celebrate as a team. And that's why I've always thought guys getting penalties for excessive celebration is crazy. Those guys put in so much hours of work and preparation and practice, like busting their ass. And when you get to a game and the play you've been working on nonstop to try and perfect it, when it comes together in a game and you score a touchdown, why wouldn't you want to celebrate that just a little bit? Excessive celebration. It's crazy. You should be allowed to excessively celebrate without taunting your opponent. But I have a feeling the Ducks are going to be taunting the Cowboys this weekend after Mike Gundy even mentioned the idea that Oregon's spending a lot of money. But there you have it. Tom Brady, I like that. He was very demanding of his teammates. He would yell at them. He was on them. I mean, he wanted to make sure that everything was perfect in terms of communication at the line of scrimmage, making sure guys ran the right route, they were in the right place, they knew what they were doing. And when they got it done, they were going to celebrate as a team. And it is funny, we never think about that. It's not just a quarterback and receiver that make things happen on a long touchdown pass. What about the offensive line? What about the running back that did a good job with the blitz pickup? Or the receiver that went out of his way to block downfield to free up his teammate? Brady's not wrong. All right, we'll keep things rolling. More football. Alex Brink's going to join the show coming up at 5:20. You can reach out to me on X at Chad and Rip City, and you can call the show at 503-248-0620. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio.
Get ready.
Well, I tell you what, we learned a lot about college football this weekend, and I think maybe a couple of healthy reminders for all of us when it comes to hype and anticipation. And I think the two stories to look at were North Carolina under Bill Belichick, and of course, Arch Manning and Texas, who were really hammered by Ohio State on Saturday morning. I was so excited for the football game, and it got underway, and the energy and the atmosphere, it was terrific. It's exactly what you want in week one. I want more of these type of big games where you've got number one and number three going head to head. It's perfect. We need more of that. Love those type of games, and I know you did too. But the weird part was, is like the game started, and I kept waiting for Arch to do something to showcase or flash some type of great talent, and it never really materialized. He struggled basically from start to finish. Now, I give Arch credit after looking awful for pretty much 3 quarters and also being the author of one of the worst QB sneaks I've ever seen in my life. I'm not sure what Texas was trying to do there at the goal line, but they failed miserably. It's like, what was that? You guys are right there knocking on the door, and you can't even get in? Are you kidding me? What a joke that was. But he continued to grind and made a couple of big throws, one down the right sideline for the touchdown. He hit the tight end on the left sideline to put them in position. But what we saw throughout the course of the game was just a lot of easy missed throws by Arch. And I think what happened with Steve Sarkisian, I saw a lot of criticism of Steve throughout the course of the game because of the training wheels or the very vanilla type play calling with Arch. I don't think that was Coach Sarkisian. I don't think he had any confidence in his quarterback because he saw him right from the start of the game and realized, like, uh-oh, we are in over our heads. And the Ohio State Buckeyes are loaded up on defense. They got a lot of talent, and they're getting pressure on us. And Arch never really looked comfortable. And I would say my biggest concern was, and again, I'm not a quarterback guru, and this is something that we can cover and talk to with Alex Brink coming up in about 15 minutes, but he didn't really seem to have his mechanics down. A lot of weird arm movements. You know, his feet never appeared to be set. He just didn't look comfortable. And I don't know what the deal is. What I'm more concerned about is that throwing motion, you know, with the mechanics, because he wasn't accurate at all. And he threw a number of balls at the feet of his receivers. We saw that throughout the course of the game. Early on in the first quarter, I didn't give it a second thought because I thought, yeah, he's nervous. I would be nervous. Who wouldn't be nervous in that situation, making your first real start on the road against the defending champs in the Ohio State Buckeyes? It was a rough watch. But he battled through and said all the right things after the game. I'm just more concerned about the mechanics, you know, the throwing motion and being inaccurate with the football. But I think the big lesson we learned with Arch, if somebody didn't play great competition in high school and has never played or started in a big-time game in college, how can we be projecting him as the number 1 overall pick in the draft? I guess it's because he's got the last name. His last name is Manning. If his last name were Johnson or Alexander or whatever you want to call him, there wouldn't be the type of expectations heaped upon him. Now, I will say this. It wasn't Arch who was driving all the hype. He's very quiet and unassuming for somebody with a big name. He wasn't the one doing it. We were. Football fans were. The media, people were all jacked up and excited to see another Manning on the field. I certainly was. So we just don't know. And I think what it proves is that playing quarterback in college and the NFL is really tough. It's not an easy thing to do. It's the most important position in sports. We need more time to be able to know what somebody is. And I'm not going to make some type of bold predictions or bold statements about Arch Manning after one game. How many quarterbacks make their first real start in that environment against that team? And if you did, how many of those guys would have great success? I don't think they would. Heck, even Ryan Day was being very conservative with Julian Sayin, who was getting his first real action. But I think it's because they had the upper hand, and he thought, you know what? The only way we lose this game is to make big mistakes. So they kept it very conservative because their defense was playing so great. So Arch is going to need more time. I think he's got the right makeup, obviously comes from the right family, but the mechanics were concerning, and I'll talk to Alex Brink about that. You know, what does he need to work on? What did he see from that game? But I think we'll see better play from Arch moving forward. Now, in the other game with North Carolina, Bill Belichick, I couldn't believe all of the talk about the hoodie going into the game. And ESPN and the coverage of the game, it's almost like TCU was the forgotten football team. And the problem is TCU was favored, and they're a better football team with a coach that's been around the college game for a long time. And they're a very good offensive team, and they went out and made some maneuvers to improve their defense. And TCU played that game exactly how they wanted to play it. But I think what happened is if you just look at it on the surface and you don't get caught up in the talk or the hype, you realize real quick, like, wait a second. TCU's got a number of starters who are returning from last year's squad that won 9 games. The North Carolina Tar Heels have 70 new players as Belichick went heavy into the transfer portal, which is what you pretty much have to do as a coach if you're trying to rebuild a program. So you have a bunch of guys who aren't familiar with Coach Hoodie, who aren't familiar with Belichick, his schemes, the way he wants to play things, and you get them out there on the field, and you see what happens. It's going to be very difficult for Coach Belichick to get the players he needs to compete against the better teams in the country. You know, the better teams that are in his conference, like Clemson. He doesn't have the talent. And those players struggled mightily. But we should have seen that coming. 70 new players against a team that's pretty well established. What did you think was going to happen? That Belichick, the mastermind, was somehow going to take 70 new players and get them ready to go? I guess the disappointing part for me was, you have many months to prepare for that one game and get ready for that one opponent because you know who's on the schedule. And they came out and got worked 48-14. Like, didn't even show up. And it looked like some of the guys maybe weren't giving their best effort towards the end of the game. It's crazy. But if we're being real, and I've believed this for a long time, and I know it's heresy to say this, I've always thought that Tom Brady was more responsible for the Patriots' success than Coach Belichick. I always lean quarterback. And if you look at all the great coaches, aside from Bill Parcells, the majority of so-called geniuses, they had phenomenal quarterbacks. I mean, look at Bill Walsh, the genius. He had Joe Montana and Steve Young. It's pretty easy to look smart when you're drawing up plays when you have those two guys, operating under center. Mike Shanahan, considered the mastermind. I love Coach Shanahan. He brought me the greatest memories of my life, sports-wise. But he had John Elway. Not hard to look good when you've got John Elway under center. Mike Holmgren had Brett Favre. Just go down the line. All of these coaches that have had great success, they're usually attached to a terrific quarterback. Look at Andy Reid. Donovan McNabb got him to a certain point, then he gets Patrick Mahomes, and now he's considered one of the greatest coaches of all time. So I'm always going to lean more quarterback, and I think in that case, with the Patriots, Tom Brady was the one who I think had more to do with their success because quarterback is so critical in the NFL. But over the last several years, Bill Belichick has done a very poor job of drafting, hasn't found good players for the Patriots. So when he gets into college and he's got to dip into the transfer portal, why would that change? And I thought the arrogance that he and Michael Lombardi and the rest of his staff had was, we're Super Bowl champions. We've figured out the college game. We know how this is done, and we're going to come out and show you. And they got embarrassed in their opener against TCU. And it just shows it's going to take time. Look at Coach Prime. Difficult process in year number 1, much better in year number 2. It's hard to build a program from scratch with so many new faces and to have the ability to get them on the same page to get ready over just a few months because you don't have the practice time. Those guys don't have any cohesion, and, it's just a process. So pretty wild, though. TCU wasn't even mentioned in the pregame. It was all about Coach Belichick, and I get that to a degree. I'll tell you one thing. Michael Jordan and Lawrence Taylor aren't going to be showing up to too many more Tar Heel games after the way that went down last night. All right, the Oregon Ducks pretty much did exactly what I talked about last week and what I thought they would do. And it's part of the reason why I'm really excited about this group. And I think a very good sign is, that Penn State game is looming a few weeks from now. I mean, the balance. I knew and really believed they would be better at running the football. I thought the offensive line would be better. I know the defensive line is going to be better, especially up the middle with their defensive tackles. But I think what we saw in that game against Montana State, and again, it's Montana State, but they came out and had tremendous balance between the run and the pass. In fact, it can't get any better. 253 yards passing, 253 yards rushing. A perfect 50-50 split in terms of yardage, and Dante Moore was just in a comfort zone. And I think with his athleticism and his talent and his arm talent, you're going to see this situation where I think Will Levis is going to be able to open up the playbook and do things that he was unable to do with Bo Nix and then Dylan Gabriel because of the unique athleticism that Moore brings to the position. And how smart does Dante Moore look right now? You start out at Oregon, go to UCLA, get some playing time under Chip Kelly, pretty good offensive mind, come back to Oregon, sit, watch, listen, learn, and then take over the football team, and he looks like a very confident young man. I mean, he was in control. I was very impressed with the Ducks. And that's what you want to see in that opener, which is essentially like a preseason game. It's a no-doubter. And Oregon left no doubt who the better football team was. But I thought the running game, the passing game, and keep in mind the Ducks, they're going to keep a lot of things under wraps between now and the Penn State game because they don't want to show too much on film. But the Ducks were in fine form. And last year, like we talked about, I think they averaged about 4.5, 4.6 yards a rush. They just didn't run the football well last year, and they didn't have the great balance in the offense, which is unlike what we've seen for so many years at Oregon, but they had in that opener against Montana State. I mean, they dominated that football game from start to finish, which is what you want to see. Over 500 yards total offense, perfect balance between the run and the pass, and Dante Moore was incredibly effective and very efficient. Very efficient. 3 touchdowns, 18 of 23 passing. So now you move on to Oklahoma State, another tune-up opportunity and get yourself ready. But that was a great first game for the Ducks, unlike last year where they kind of stumbled out of the gate and had some issues with the offensive line, couldn't get the run game going. This was a great way to start. And now you want to continue to fine-tune in all the different phases of the game to get ready for Penn State because that's going to be a significant jump in the talent department. But I thought a great first day for Oregon in this brand new football season. Going back to Ohio State and Texas for just a moment, I want you to hear Steve Sarkisian, who talked about the expectations being a bit out of whack.
The expectations were out of control on the outside, but I'd say let's finish the book before we judge it. Right? This is one chapter, and we got a long season to go play.
Yeah, the expectations I think for Arch that were placed upon him were a little bit out of whack. But, we saw that he's got a lot of work to do. Now, Sarkisian did go on to say that he saw some growth throughout the course of the game with Arch.
The growth throughout the game for Arch was really encouraging for me. We're going to be fine. Like I said, we got work to do as a team and as an offense. But ultimately, I'm getting on the plane knowing we're going to be a good football team. And so, hey, we didn't win tonight. That's the life of a competitor. We went for it in a tough place against a good team. But we'll get back on the horse and we'll play good football this season.
Yeah, I like Coach Sarkisian. And I would agree. They're going to play good football this season. And the great thing now with the playoff expansion, you can lose your opener and not worry about missing the postseason. You just got to bounce back, get some wins, and move forward. And hopefully that'll end up being a great learning experience for Arch Manning, who, was laboring out there. I thought Julian Sand looked good. I didn't know what to expect from him either. But he looked comfortable, made good decisions, and didn't make the big mistake. And a lot of times in those games, that's what it's all about because usually teams will beat themselves. But Ohio State didn't make the big mistake, and Julian Sand was just, he just ran the offense the way that Coach Day wanted. And that was an impressive game. Ohio State looked really good. And that's how I see the Big Ten this year. Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State battling it out. 2 of those 3 teams will get into the Big Ten title game. But if you're a Duck fan, you got to be feeling pretty good about yourself right now. You go into the opener, some unknowns with the new faces, the new quarterback, and all of a sudden you get a look at that and you're like, okay, I can work with this. They look pretty good. I think what's impressive, too, is when you look at Oregon just year to year now and what Coach Lanning is doing, just the talent that they have up and down the roster where they can plug guys in and get production, even with the young receivers who I thought played really well. And that's a good place to be if you're the Ducks. All right, we'll dive into all of this coming up next. Alex Brink, our college football and NFL insider, will join us, and we'll get his take on what he saw from Arch. I want to get his take on Julian Sand, who I would imagine he had a chance to be around at Elite 11. We'll get his take on the Beavs, on the Cougs' first win, and the storylines he's looking forward to the most in week 1 of the NFL, which is coming up in just a couple of days. Chad doing here on a Tuesday. Hope you had a great long weekend. Alex Brink is up next. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, Rip City Drive, and it's a pleasure because this begins our football season. Our college football and NFL insider, former Washington State Cougar Alex Brink, is back. He's with E4 Sports. Alex, it's great to have you back on the show. I loved watching football all weekend. I want to start with Arch Manning, and then we'll get to your very first start in your college career. But you could tell early on that he was struggling. I thought it might be nerves, but as the game continued, we continued to see some weird mechanics, some arm movements that seemed a little bit bizarre. His feet never appeared to be set, and he was skipping balls to his receivers. What did you see from Arch as that game proceeded against Ohio State?
Well, look, I mean, as a young player, and Arch is still a young player, despite what the media would make him out to be. That's a pretty classic example of somebody getting a little overwhelmed, right? I mean, that's a really good defense he faced for sure. The speed was, I think the speed was there. The scheme, much was talked about the scheme, obviously, with Matt Patricia, being pretty challenging coming from the NFL, bringing some concepts. And I think ultimately that kind of got to Arch. Definitely early, you saw him, like you mentioned, the mechanics unravel a little bit. That's a sign of somebody that's just, their process is sped up too much, right? And so, I think it's a good learning experience. And I think for those that don't know the Arch Manning story, other than maybe his last name, is, Arch Manning really hasn't played very high-level football up until this point. His high school in Nashville was not very good. They didn't play at a high level. He was a good player, obviously, and there were some good players that have come out of there. But in general, it's not like he was playing in the Trinity League in California or somewhere out in Georgia or in Texas. And then even some of the games he played last year was not against top-tier talent most of the time. And the time it was not super consistent. So he's in a place where he's a really gifted player, but he's got to get better and get more experience underneath his belt. So I think you're going to watch this year, you're going to see him really improve significantly because of what he went through on Saturday.
Do you have any concerns about the mechanics, in terms of, the ball coming out low or, he just seemed to be off target. And I'm wondering if was there something wrong with him maybe, or is that just a case of being sped up to where you're uncomfortable and so nothing is going well for you?
Yeah, we like to call it seeing ghosts, right? All of a sudden, like you feel like a guy's around you, so you move your feet like you're sliding. You saw it, right? Like he was like sliding away from nobody to try and make a throw sidearm. He was seeing ghosts. Like he was just, everything was moving a little too fast for him, and that's super fixable. I mean, that's something that once you watch the tape and you get comfortable and you kind of get back into who you are and your confidence level, it's really easy to fix, especially for a guy like him. Like he'll probably watch a couple of those throws, those little shallow routes that he missed behind and stuff like that, and he'll be able to fix that right away.
We're talking with Alex Brink. I was thinking about you as I was watching that because I'm like, dude, Alex has been through the whole thing. He can relate to everything that Arch is feeling right now. So take us back. What game was your very first start in your college career?
Yeah, I saw a lot of ghosts in my first start. It was down in Corvallis at Oregon State, and Mark Banker, the defensive coordinator, he had my number most of my career, frankly, but definitely as a young redshirt freshman, he got after me pretty good there too. My process was also sped up. It's also interesting, and this is similar to Arch's story. I had played earlier in the year. I played in the second game of the year against Colorado, came off the bench, and actually played really well. But then you have your first start, and him, Arch even more so, whole offseason of expectation, all the conversation, Heisman Trophy candidate, all these things. It's starting is harder than coming off the bench. That's just the reality of it. And so the mentality and the way it goes and managing the entire game. And so I remember feeling very overwhelmed in that first start, and then really settling in. My second start was against USC, and that was Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, Matt Grudega, the entire Lofa Tutupu, that defense where most of them went in the first round, it felt like. And I felt better in that game than I did in the game against Oregon State the week before.
So you weren't too concerned after that first start against Oregon State?
No, not at all, because there's good things, right? Like just like Arch, think about the big throw down the sideline in the whole shot at the end to get the team in position kind of before they went out on downs. He had some really good moments, I think, and that's really what you lean into. It's like, oh, he can do it. It's not like he can't do it at that level. He can do it at a really high level, obviously. And so you take those good moments, you say, okay, I can do it, and you just try and build on those.
Hey, how were you taught to run a QB sneak? Because I think Arch may have ran the worst QB sneak I've ever seen in my life. But what were you taught to do, and what are you supposed to do? I've never asked you this question before, but you're under center. You're going to run the QB sneak. What are you trying to accomplish there?
Well, there's a couple different versions of this. First of all, I will say this. As a quarterback doing a quarterback sneak, you are very much beholden to what happens with the guys directly in front of you. And for him, the guys directly in front of him didn't do a lot. But that being said, you're kind of trying to look for a bubble or a crease, right? Where's the biggest gap you can find? And what happened to him, they were all stacked up over the center and the guards. Sometimes you almost need to slide – as you move forward, slide to the outside gap, like outside the guard, in between the guard and the tackle, because that's where the space is. And so, you got to get your pads low, obviously. You got to keep your feet moving. He didn't really have a chance where he started. Maybe he could have slid off to the side, maybe not. I kind of felt like that was just too much pressure, just too much pressure on him, honestly.
All right, one more question from the Ohio State-Texas game. You had a chance to work with Julian Sand, the Buckeyes' new starting quarterback down at Elite 11. He really impressed me with the way he managed the game. What are your thoughts on Sand and then also the way he played in that game against Texas?
Well, you kind of saw the best of what Julian's saying is, and that's really, really Joe Cool, man. Like cool, calm, collected, never seems to get overwhelmed, incredibly accurate. I mean, talk about a guy putting the ball in between a guy's face mask, on a guy's face mask, right? It seemed like he was consistently throwing the ball with a high level of accuracy and giving his guys a chance to win. And that's what I knew from Julian, coming through Elite 11. Really gifted player. I mean, 5-star level player, all the things. And sometimes when you go to Ohio State, you get even now in the NIL world, you kind of get buried a little bit on a roster, or transfers come in, and when it's your time, you want to take advantage of it. And he certainly, I felt like, did that in his first start.
We're talking with Alex Brink, former Coug, now with E4 Sports, here on the Rip City Drive, taking a look at Week 1 in college football. All right, Kalen DeBoer, the Bama Crimson Tide got off to a bad start against Florida State when they got beat down by a more physical football team. And I guess what I'm curious about with Kalen DeBoer, his track record tells us what he is. He is a terrific football coach, but he's having great struggles at Alabama. And, of course, he's taken over for a legend in Nick Saban. I'm just wondering if maybe sometimes, depending on the coach and the personality, if maybe down south is not the best fit for Kalen DeBoer, but what are your thoughts on some of the struggles you're seeing with Bama and Coach DeBoer right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a couple of things are happening at the same time, and they're not necessarily all Kalen DeBoer's fault at Alabama. He's obviously taken over for a legend in Nick Saban. He's trying to put, his stamp on the program, whether it's processes or systems or recruiting or whatever. And that's always a challenge. There's always, I think, a transition period. The problem is you don't obviously have, much time at a place like Alabama to go through that transition period. I think the second thing that's happening that probably isn't talked about enough is that the school, and there's probably a couple of them, but Alabama certainly being one of them that is being hurt the most by transfer portal and NIL is Alabama. In the past, Nick Saban could go out and get nearly every 5-star that Kirby Smart wasn't getting at Georgia and put them on his roster at Alabama. And for the most part, they would never leave, right? And there's an argument to be made that they might have been getting paid while they were doing it, but we don't know for sure. But that being said, now with the transfer portal, it is starting to democratize the entire system where if somebody has the money to pay for an athlete, they will go to that school, not just because they're Alabama and the Crimson Tide, but because they want to play or because they're getting paid more money or whatever. So Alabama's roster, although still good, is also battling the fact that other rosters are also still good, right? And so I think that challenge, coupled with just the idea of DeBoer going down into Tuscaloosa, I think those things are creating some headwinds, frankly, for that staff. And now the problem is once you start losing a little bit and there's some chinks in the armor, well, now you've got a real problem because a place like Alabama, that fan base is going to rip it apart, and so will the national media and all the things. And so you're fighting this kind of three-headed monster while trying to manage this organization.
Wow. Well, it's going to be a storyline to watch, and the pressure is going to continue to grow down there in Tuscaloosa. I want to ask you about the Ducks. I was impressed with what I saw in Week 1. I know it's against Montana State, but it's hard to find better balance when you have 253 yards through the air and 253 yards on the ground. But I really liked what I saw from Dante Moore, who you've talked about this before, getting a year to sit back and watch and learn and understand the system run by Will Levis. He looked real comfortable out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I tell you what, I love Dante Moore. I mean, I've loved him since I met him at Elite 11. I thought he was solid at UCLA. I thought that was kind of a little bit of a raw deal, and I think it was a good move for him to get out of there and go to Eugene and sit behind Dylan Gabriel, learn the Will Stein system, like really get a feel for it, and now come back with a high level of confidence. And look, Oregon's at a point with Dan Lanning where they're just reloading, right? There's not really a down period because of the way they recruit and the NIL budget and all the things. So if you are a guy like Dante Moore who's got a lot of ability and who's a smart football player, you're kind of walking into the perfect scenario, And so I thought they looked great, like you said. Regardless of opponent, you think about last year. I mean, a really good Duck football team struggled mightily with Idaho last year at home, and this year they really took care of business. And it's a credit to the coaching staff to get them ready, but also that roster is I think, really well built.
It's Alex Brink here on the Rip City Drive. Elsewhere, Oregon State struggles in game one, and it's just a product of Coach Brady continuing to build the program, and it's going to take time because when you bring in those guys, a lot of different guys from the portal, I just don't know how you make that mesh. But what did you see from Oregon State in that game against Cal? And I got to give Coach Wilcox the credit, man. They were ready to go in that opener.
Well, yeah, and I was going to kind of say that I think as much as we want to make that game about Oregon State, I do think that we got to give a lot of credit to Cal. One is Justin Wilcox, for sure, and I think their ability, Coach Wilcox's ability to craft defenses that are very stingy, and along with co-defensive coordinators Terrence Brown and Vic Soto, like those guys. They do such a good job on the defensive side of the football. So I wasn't really surprised that they gave Oregon State a lot of trouble, like you said, with Malik Murphy starting a transfer. You've got, you're trying to get the offensive line going, even though you have good backs. So offense is usually a little behind. Where Cal deserves a lot of credit is on the offensive side of the football. Brian Harson's calling the plays. They went out and got Jaron Sangapulatele, who was a original Oregon commit, 5-star kid that went through the Elite 11 process, was a real late bloomer from the state of Hawaii, and he is special, Chad. He is a really, really gifted player, and they went out and got him after he decided to leave Oregon. And if you watch him play, I mean, he maybe missed 2 or 3 throws that were on him. The rest of it was as good as he gets, right? And I think that's what makes Cal a really dangerous team and probably took Oregon State by surprise a little bit because a true freshman should not be able to operate like that.
Well, I surely liked some of Murphy's comments after the game. And, he showed some flashes with his ability in terms of what he can do in terms of moving around, but particularly with his throwing. I was impressed. But after the game, he said, I feel like I've got a lot more to do on offense and not even just like playing-wise. I've got to be better, just being more coachable, being there for my teammates, creating more plays. We left a lot on the table, getting the ball in the paint. It's hard to win a game when you don't score points. So I've got to do a better job of keeping the ball moving forward and not giving the ball back when our defense just came off the field. Like, he took accountability and is providing some of that leadership. I like him. What's your take on where Murphy's at?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me one bit. I mean, got to work closely with Malik out of high school at Elite 11, and then he was back this summer as a counselor and got to be around him again and kind of listening to his story at Duke and the opportunity. He feels very thankful for the opportunity he's getting with the Beavers, and he's a very talented player. I think he's got a great head on his shoulders, and those comments really reflect that. And he knows, like, it's going to be on him to make sure if the running game can't go, right, then it's going to land on him. And that's hard as a quarterback because you're at your best when you have a balanced running game. But at the same time, he knows he's good enough to carry that team. And even when it's hard, he feels like he can find a way to do it. So I think it's super mature. I think that's a mature response. I also think, frankly, Oregon State needs to run the football with more balance if they're in general going to have success offensively.
I wanted to ask you, what impressed you the most week one of college football? What jumped out to you?
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, I already talked about Sangapulatele at Cal. That was just really, really impressive, frankly. I think that LSU win. I mean, look, there's a lot was made of Brian Kelly and being able to go into Death Valley and beat Clemson. Kind of made Cade Klubnik look like a fish out of water. I thought that was a really impressive win also.
All right, what about the Cougs? They had to sweat one out against Idaho. What did you make of the Cougars' performance? You were on the call for that game.
Yeah, I feel like that's a leading question, Chad, because that's not one of those things. That's not something that impressed me with the Washington State performance in college football this week. Washington State really struggled with Idaho. Idaho's got a new coaching staff, but they came out and played really well, honestly. And the Cougs, I think, showed some flashes under new head coach Jimmy Rogers. Offensively, they just could not operate. I mean, they couldn't run the football at all. I think 3 total yards rushing when you take away some sacks and stuff. You know, they went with a new quarterback, Jackson Potter, a young player, no starts under his belt, looks the part. Probably didn't get a chance to really, really let it fly as much as he should. The one touchdown drive, I think every positive play was a pass from him. And so I think offensively they're going to need to spread it out a little bit more than they maybe thought. Defensively, though, they did look really good, which is kind of the Jimmy Rogers calling card from South Dakota State, one of the top defenses in the country last year, brought a ton of players over. They flew around. They really attacked the football. I think if the Cougs are going to win games this year, it's going to be because of that defense holding teams under 21 points. And so in the end, they're 1-0, not 0-1, and that's really all you can ask for, frankly.
Yeah, they held Joshua Wood to 33 yards passing on 12 of 20, which is impressive. But you mentioned the rushing game, 22 carries for 3 yards. They averaged 0.1 yard per carry. That's not going to get the job done, Alex.
No, and there's a lot made in the offseason that they wanted to have balance and be more of a run first, not run first, but kind of a more balanced running attack than even they have been in these kind of new versions of the air raid the past few years. And, use more tight ends. They brought over 3 backs from South Dakota State plus 1 holdover. They thought they had some good players, and they just couldn't get going. And I think some of that was attributed to some new pieces on the offensive line, for sure. Some of it was attributed to a good Idaho defense really selling out against the run. But in the end, Jimmy Rogers said this, the Cougs need to make adjustments faster in game than they did. They kind of kept going back to the same well, and they couldn't get water.
Who do you think's got a tougher road ahead, Kalen DeBoer or Bill Belichick?
Kalen DeBoer, no doubt about it. I mean, one, Kalen DeBoer is not Bill Belichick, obviously, right? There's a little bit longer leash for a guy like Bill Belichick. The expectations in Chapel Hill are completely different. Even if it's Bill Belichick there, they're completely different than in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Certainly following, one of the greatest college football coaches of all time, in Nick Saban. So I think DeBoer's got a really tough road ahead of him if he doesn't turn it around quickly. Whereas, Belichick, if for some reason it doesn't work out, people kind of get it, right? Like this is a thing that has happened before, or some version of it. And I don't think that would surprise anybody, right? This is college football nowadays is a very different game than the NFL. Again, like there's some level of expectation for both. I just think DeBoer is in a much tougher spot.
And with the changing landscape in college football, I think DeBoer's buyout is close to $70 million. With the way these schools are operating now and having to spend so much money on players, and they're going to their boosters to get money for NIL, a lot of these schools can't afford the massive buyout, even if they wanted to make a change at coach. I think Kirby Smart right now has got like $118 million to buy him out. Like schools can't do NIL and spend that type of money on coach buyouts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. It's also a fantastic exercise in peeling back why we're even in this position to begin with college football. And most of it has to do with coaches' salaries and facility spends, which is now why we've gotten to this NIL world. And the reality is there's just not enough dollars to go around for all 3 of those things.
Yeah, you're right. One other question for you, because I'm always curious what's going through your mind as a quarterback and the way you watch the game. Week 1 of the NFL season's coming up. What storyline or maybe a couple of things are you looking forward to seeing in week 1? Is it quarterback related? Is it something else? What are you excited about?
I mean, I'm just excited about all of it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
but,
that works.
I'm really intrigued. There's a couple of things I'm intrigued by. Some of the guys that obviously I'm close with or know of as far as like offensive systems. I'm really intrigued by what happens in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell and J.J. McCarthy.
Yes.
I really want to see like how that plays out because I think Kevin O'Connell is as good as it gets, similar to Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and all those guys. We're going to find out if he can go from if he's really a plug and play quarterback system like some of those other guys, right? So I want to figure out what that looks like. I'm as intrigued by everybody about the Michael Parsons trade, and like, is that going to move the needle for the Packers in a very significant way, which probably should. I'm wondering too, like, do the Dolphins kind of get back to that form that they had a couple of years ago, and can Tua stay healthy? And then I just saw, recently the Matthew Stafford's going to start. What are the Rams going to be like? Are they really going to, is he going to be healthy enough for them to be in it? And then probably the last one for me, and this is, again, semi-personal, is I'm interested to see what the Seahawks do, right? I love Sam Darnold as a player. I thought he was awesome in Minnesota, had a raw deal kind of before that. I want to see if he's able to kind of do the same thing under Clint Kubiak up in Seattle, and if they can have success.
Well, it's going to be so much fun. Alex Brink from E4 Sports. All right, we're entering fall, so school is now getting underway for a lot of kids. What do you guys have going on at E-Force? What's the focus?
Well, there's so much going on at E-Force right now. A lot of it has to do around our sports performance training, so strength training, speed training, injury prevention, agility, quickness, all those sort of things. Anywhere from age 8 to 18 and above. We have different sorts of classes, different options. We've got 3 facilities here in the metro area, one in Milwaukee off of McLaughlin, one in Beaverton off Allen Boulevard, and then we have a new one up in Vancouver as well for those in Vancouver or in the North Portland area. So if you got an athlete that's looking to get faster and stronger, improve in their sports, check out e4sports.com. You can click on our performance training tab, learn all about our classes, open Monday through Saturday, morning and afternoon time, so fits around schedules and sports schedules and work schedules. Really great opportunity for young athletes to improve in all facets.
All right, Alex Brink, former Coug, E4 Sports. He'll join us every week to talk football. I need to find a cigarette and smoke it after that conversation, man. I'm feeling good as we get ready for the first week of the NFL and week 2 of college football. Thanks for your time, buddy.
We're back, baby.
All right, big thanks to Alex Brink. I love talking ball with him. We'll come back. I will share something that I did last night that's insane. I know it's not a surprise with me. And just a couple of random thoughts rolling around in my mind about this past weekend of football, which is great. So appreciate your time. Big thanks to Alex Brink. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio.